This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back. Welcome back into the Primetime Podcast here on Most Valuable Podcast. If you're joining us again, welcome back. If you are new, this is the podcast here at MVP where we talk about the best sports news in the world of college football. And Brandon, we are continuing our journey. We have been on a journey since, I want to say, the middle of June.
It feels like we started last year.
Yes, where we started our Power 5 previews. We have gone through most of them. We have 2 Power 5 conferences left. We've got the Pac-12, which we are starting today, and then in 2 weeks we'll do the Big 12, and we will be done with our previews, getting ready for the season that is just a little over a month away now, as we will have games at the end of August to enjoy for college football. And we are going to look at today the Pac-12 conference, like I said, but we're going to look at the South today. We'll look at the North tomorrow, next week, not tomorrow, next week, and then we'll do the Big 12. But Brandon, the way that this works, if you are new, is we start from the bottom, we go to the top. So we're going to start with Arizona. We'll end with Colorado. And I want to get right into it. The Arizona Wildcats. And usually I come into this like, okay, Brandon, where do you want to start? Because usually I am throwing a question to you to start these. But I actually came in and I was like, you know what? I know where I want to start this one. And for Arizona, I think it is just, it's like a sore thumb. It's just painfully obvious where we need to start coming into this year. And that's the defense. This is a team that in 8 Pac-12 losses last year allowed 44.8 points per game. Now, Rich Rod is bringing in 2 new defensive coaches, but the defensive line is still very undersized. You have a linebacking group that is very freshman-laden. This is a team that, if they want to do well or improve on last year, it really starts with the defense. You can't be giving up 44.8 points per game and expect to win those games and have your offense kind of score more than the defense lets up.
Ricky, I completely agree with you. And one thing I want to throw out there to you before we really get going here is, would you believe that 3 years ago, the same Arizona Wildcats, well, they're really not the same because of how the team has changed, but
won the South.
They were playing for the Pac-12 championship against Oregon.
Yep.
3 years ago. 3 years ago, and last year they got just 1 win in the conference. I mean, that's crazy to me. And the last time that they were 3-9 or had that few wins, Mike Stoops was the coach. I mean, it just, that's how kind of far Arizona fell last year. At 1-8, 3-9 overall. They couldn't win games. And I think a big part of that is kind of what you brought up, was the defense. I mean, offenses hit 66% of their passes, completed 66% of their. I mean, that's an outstanding number.
When I'm looking at quarterbacks, I've said it on previews before, when it's like, well, he's right around that 60 number, which is good. 66 is well above that 60 number that I look for in a completion percentage.
66 is incredible. And then 3,300 yards and 34 touchdowns against that defense. And they only picked off 8 passes, and 5 of those 8 passes that were picked off were in the first 4 games. So there wasn't a whole lot of activity in the middle to end of the season. There wasn't a whole lot of great things going on for this Arizona defense last year. Weren't a whole lot of good things, but one bright spot coming back this year is safety Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, who was the leading tackler last year, will return this year, and that's going to be a big plus for them. But you would like to think that this defense can't go any farther backwards. That there really only is one way up for them, and it's going up. You know, there's only one way to go, and it's up.
Well,
and I think that
you're almost at rock bottom.
These Rich Rodriguez defenses, that had been so good at one point, those need to return. And they need to return quickly, because if Arizona wants to be able to try and get back to form, and I don't think that they're going to get back to form this year. I don't think that that's going to be possible at all. But for them to be able to make strides to get to that point, they really need to start quickly with that defense. I mean, you look at the games that they had. I mean, it was a stretch of 7-8 games where they lost.
Yeah.
And the amount of points that they gave up, and in some of the games they were somewhat competitive. I mean, you can look at some of them and they were in it, but then you have games where it's like, oh my gosh.
The only one that I'm looking at, and this is from Final Score, there were some games where obviously when you're watching the game, you're like, oh, they're in it for some point, and then the other team just pulls away. But if I am looking just at score, the only Pac-12 game that they were in last year was the one against Washington where they lost 35-28 in overtime. Everything else, 45-24, 36-23.
You could say that they're in that one. 36-23, you could say that they're in that one.
I'll give you 13.1, but 34-10. The Washington State one 63-7. You're not in that game. 69-7. 49-24, then 42-17. It was maybe if I give you the Utah game, you're in 2 games. 2 of your 8 Pac-12 losses you're in those games. The rest of them you're out, and one of them was a 69-7 loss. You just can't have that, because the thing that it does is it puts pressure on the offense. If you're not doing well defensively, it puts that pressure on the offense to where I don't care if you're completing over 65% of your passes coming into this season, because if your team is letting up that many points on the other side, you kind of have to either keep up with that or you're going to lose in those games. So to me, yeah, we usually talk about offense, and that's usually what we hit first, but when you're giving up that many points, then on the offensive side, they were last in the Pac-12 in scoring last year. That together, those don't put together a resume for winning in a Power 5 conference.
I completely agree with you. You can't continue to have games like that or stretches of 8 losses like you did. But at the same time, I think that we have to give it to Arizona that there were so many injuries on this team. Offense, defense, there were injuries galore. They really didn't have a chance. And I think that that's why a lot of people will give last season, they'll say that Rich Rodriguez is going to be on the hot seat come this year. But I think at the same time, he's not going to be the guy on the hottest seat, because you take a look at last season, and as a whole, as a body, you didn't play that well. But at the same time, you weren't playing with the guys that you started the season with. You weren't playing, with healthy running backs. You saw with Nick Wilson and J.J. Taylor and all these, just and Zach Green, another one that the injury bug hit those guys. But if it doesn't, they have a really strong running back core. They've got a really strong running game, and that's probably going to be the strongest piece of the offense for them, is going to be at running back. And if they can stay healthy, they'll be able to carry this team, and I think that they'll do a good job of that. But then you look at the quarterback position, and you could go with a number of different guys there. Brandon Dawkins is a guy who I think would be one of the most likely candidates, because he was kind of thrown in last year again, when injuries occurred. And they also have Khalil Tate there. I think those two will be the ones to battle it out, but you just never know.
Well, and that's the thing. Right now for the quarterback position, they got to make a decision, because when spring practices ended, we had a 2-dog race for the quarterback position. It was either Brandon Dawkins or Khalil Tate. And they were in and I'm using the quote here from Athlon Sports, in a too close to call battle for that quarterback position. And yes, you'd come in and Dawkins was kind of thrown in there, but he's also had injuries the past 2 seasons. He's been sidelined with injuries 3 times in the past 2 years. The guy that I think that, like you said, that this offense needs to kind of rely on is the tailback, and that's J.J. Taylor. He's got to be the one, although he's only a sophomore, he's the one that I look at to kind of say, okay, I want to see what you can do this year, because I look at the stats last year. And your leading rusher was Brandon Dawkins, who had almost 1,000 yards.
And that's your quarterback.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that if you want to go with a guy who's going to be solid, and I say solid because he only, I think, attempted on average 18 passes per game or something kind of small like that. He made up for it in the running game. I think he averaged 94 rushing yards per game. So he was able to do it, on both sides, with his legs, with his arm, and things like that. And obviously with his legs, he was more effective. But I think knowing that you have that is going to make it even easier to make a decision to go with him, at least to start the season.
It's funny. The games before the USC game, because he didn't play in that one. So you've got Grambling State to Utah. The most passes he thrown was 31. The least that he threw in a game was 17. That was UCLA. Others were 29, 21, and 20. Ever since the USC game to end the season, in games that he played significant amounts in, 15. 5 of 15, 9 of 19, 10 of 17. So nowhere near what he was doing. However, when you see the rushing attempts in those games, 17, 18, 15 from your quarterback. I think that it's good to have a guy that is explosive and can hurt you either with the run or the pass. However, the thing you've got to kind of you got to think about is, do you want a guy who it's like, okay, he's a runner and teams are not going to be afraid of his passing ability? Because when I look at games like that, 10 for 17, 9 for 19, 5 for 15, I think some teams might say, okay, well, we're going to defend the pass, but load up on the run. Make sure he doesn't leave the pocket. Make sure we load up on the run and stop him there, to where you got to have that quarterback that can say, oh, okay, you're going to try to stop me on the run. You got to respect my pass. And if they're not able to do that, it's going to equal 3 and outs, and that's going to equal the defense coming back on the field. The defense is going to get more tired. They're going to put up more points, and you're in the same kind of system you were last year.
I think you what you need to do, though, as a quarterback for Brandon Dawkins, is what he needs to be able to do is he needs to be a better passer. That's what it comes down to. You already know what you have in him as a running, as basically a running back. I wanted to say a running back. He's not a running back. He's a quarterback. But you know what you have in him. He needs to be able to develop into that quarterback. That quarterback, the guy who can stay in the pocket. But then the offensive line needs to give him the time to be able to do so. And that's another thing is, if this offensive line can come out and do some good things, then your running backs stay healthy. You're able to open up some really good holes for them, and you're able to take some pressure off your quarterback, who's going to need some time to be able to find his guys, make some reads, and complete those passes that he just wasn't doing last year. So I think that's going to be one of the things for him where he needs to most improve. That's simple. That is a simple spot where you can look at it and go, well, you have to just improve at the quarterback position. But I'll be very interested to see if we can get an entire Arizona Wildcats season this next year where we don't see too many injuries, because then that's going to give us a very, very good look of how they are, of how good they are or how bad they are in a certain sense. So that's what needs to happen, is the injury bug needs to stay away from Arizona, and it's obviously you cannot say, just stay away, take a pill, you won't get injured. But
apple a day keeps the injury drug away. That's what I've always heard.
Yeah. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's what's going to need to happen for them. They're going to have to stay healthy, and they're going to just have to produce. That's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to. It's so simple to say. It's so hard to put into practice. But Rich Rodriguez, he needs to be able to come back to form as this coach that he was hired on as. I was
going to say that this is an important year for Rich Rod and the Arizona Wildcats, because he came in 8-5, 8-5, then boom, that 10-4 season where they were 7-2 in the Pac-12, loses to Oregon State in the championship game, goes to the Fiesta Bowl, loses that game, and then kind of ever since, it was a 7-6 year where they didn't do well in conference. Then last year, which was totally awful. If you're an Arizona fan, you're not happy seeing your team bottom of the conference, only one win, which you won. Yeah, you beat your rival in Arizona State. So, I mean, there's a little bit where it's like, woo, we got them. But you're still 1-8 and 3-9 overall. This is an important season to see if he can bounce back. And the one thing I want to say to kind of catch the Tony Reales out there who are going to correct me in the comment section, when I talked about J.J. Taylor, he's not going to be the only running back. Senior Nick Wilson will be there also, but Taylor is also a guy that has struggled with injuries where he missed 8 games with a broken ankle as well. So he's going to come in and we're going to say, can he stay healthy? The question, I think, and this is the last question I kind of want to end this with, is we've talked about Brandon Dawkins. However, I know that you look at Khalil Tate and it's like, okay, he's got similar tendencies to Dawkins. Is there a chance that this coaching staff, of course, it's going to be one in fall practices before the season. Like this could be a situation where we've talked about with numerous teams in our preview that they might not make a decision until mid-August to who their starter is going to be. Could we see a situation where they go, you know what? We like what Dawkins brings on the ground, but we're not completely sold with it. Let's go with the sophomore in Khalil Tate.
No, absolutely not. Why would they go with Khalil Tate? Because Khalil Tate has done nothing to impress anybody, I don't think. I mean, if you look at his numbers from what he did last year, there was nothing impressive there. There was nothing impressive there that would make me go, he has to go in over Dawkins. You actually lose out, I think, if you go with Tate, not Dawkins. And we haven't even, talked about being able to see the freshman who could be coming out, Kahari Lane, and I do believe I'm saying that right, but if a Miami fan's watching, I'm sure they'll correct us. But I think that there's no reason. There's no reason why you don't go with Dawkins, because not that he was great through the air, but he had much more to bring to the table. He was the guy that they went with first, and when the injury happened last year to Solomon, and then what he brings in the running game, it's when you look at a guy like a Jalen Hurts, for a small example, is that he's a good passer, but he's a great runner. And he brings both things to the table. With Tate, you get an average passer and a guy who doesn't run a whole lot. With Dawkins, you get a guy who runs a lot and is very successful doing it. And a guy who, let's give him some more time, and he can be an effective passer. So that's why I don't think there's a question here. I think Dawkins is your main man, and then you just hope he stays healthy and he can repeat his rushing numbers and add on to his passing numbers. Now remember, he didn't start every game last year.
Yeah.
He didn't do that. So that's what people need to remember as well.
Well, and here's another thing to put into the quarterback situation is this isn't a conversation like we had when you mentioned Miami, where we had the one quarterback this is the grizzled vet. The other one is the newcomer, but the newcomer actually shows promise and you can see that tangible result on the field. The thing that hurts Arizona in this quarterback battle is that, like Brandon Dawkins is obviously the more explosive on the field, especially with his running ability. But I think no matter which one you put in, like if I'm Rich Rodriguez, whether it's Dawkins, whether it's Tate, that person alone does not give me more touchdowns than my quarterbacks had last year. 3 for Tate, 8 for Dawkins last year. Neither one on their own is going to give me more passing touchdowns and more points. It's going to take a team effort. And the thing that I think with this Arizona kind of as a whole for this season is what's going to be important, and why I said this is an important year for Rich Rodriguez is he's got a contract buyout at the end of this year that would be $5.1 million. If their new athletic director in Dave Hickey wants to make a change, buy him out for $5.1 million, that change can happen at the end of this year. And if I see another 3-win season where you're only winning 1 in the Pac-12, I don't know why Dan Hickey wouldn't make that change. However, this roster, although it doesn't look good for this year, because it's young, you can build it up for next year, and 2018 could be a better and more promising year than 2017. Arizona has all the chances in the world to have a more successful season. They could sweep non-conference because we don't know how Houston's going to be with losing their quarterback from last year, losing their head coach and most of their staff from last year. They get a new coach coming in, and then it's the Pac-12. Yeah, you get Oregon State, which could be an easy win. That one's at home. You beat Arizona State last year. Cal could be a game where I could see them winning. I don't know if I'm ready to crown them in that game, but I could possibly at best see a 6-win season here in this schedule. However, at best, I think it's going to be another 3 or 4 win season, and then Hinkie is going to have to make a decision. Do I buy out Rich Rodriguez, or do I let him work with this team for a promising 2018?
I think a successful season for Arizona would be 7 wins. If they got to 7 wins, I think they'd be pretty darn happy. And I think that we need to also remember that last season, we can't go off this season by looking at last season completely because of the injuries. There were injuries all over the field. If this team can stay mainly healthy, I don't think 6 or 7 wins is out of the question. I just don't think it is. You'd like to think that they're going to be Northern Arizona and UTEP. If a win against Houston to start off 3-0 would be very big. Cal, I think that's a team that they could beat. Oregon State is kind of up there in the air.
Oregon State and Arizona, I could see them easily winning those.
And Arizona State, most likely they don't beat Oregon, but we don't know what Oregon's going to be like. They weren't all that great last year, but they have a new coach. They have a kind of a new team this year. So that'll be interesting to see. And then Washington State as well. They were good last year, but are they going to be the same?
Washington
as
State
what they
was
were
also the team that blew them out 69-7 last year.
You want to avenge that 69-7 loss. But I think Arizona could definitely see 6 wins. If the team stays healthy and they're able to do what they wanted to do last year, I think that they could see 6, maybe even 7 wins, 7 being the cap for this year. But they certainly do need to be better. Not only stay away from the injury bug, but they need to be better in a number of different positions.
Well, and this is where we're going to turn the conversation on to you guys. Let us know down below in the comment section. What do you guys feel for the Arizona Wildcats coming into this season? Who are you taking at quarterback? What are some big players that you are looking to contribute this year? And also, I'll throw out the question. I didn't throw it out completely to Brandon, but I'll throw it out to you guys. Is this a season where Rich Rod's basically coaching for his job? Like, if they get to another 3 or 4 win season, do you see the buyout coming into effect and you guys getting a new coach next season? Let us know down below in the comment section.